Hey guys, it's Justin again with another video. I'm just not going to say it's going to be short, it's not. I'm going to do like a little Let's Learn with Justin little kind of segment, if you will. This is the railgun for my GM project that I'm working on. The rest of the build is done, but this is what remains. I've got the two forks to the railgun, taped on here because I'm not ready to glue them on yet. I've got one little issue with maintaining them being straight, I guess, would be the easiest way to say it. You can really see it there. I gotta fix that, but once I get that all sorted out, which I don't know how difficult that will or won't be, it's pretty much ready for detailing. So what I'm going to be doing is adding some detail around the sides and like maybe a camera or something along the top, some sort of detail on it, just so it doesn't look so plain and blocky and boring. And this pegs right into this for the GM cardigan backpack. It's pretty long. I'd say I can get you the exact measurements. You know, it's about 13.5, almost 14 centimeters in length from front to back. But what I need to do here is I need to create something that will kind of overlap this just a little bit, just so it kind of blends the shapes together a little bit. And then something that goes along the top here, just so this has more of a transition. And then I'm going to kind of cover this part up a little bit too, around here, just so that everything kind of flows into one solid design. So what I'm going to show you here is what I'm going to be doing with the top piece here. Now, again, this isn't a tutorial or anything like that, so I don't treat this like a tutorial. I'm learning as I go along. Probably not the best way to do things, but you gotta start somewhere. So we're going to take the forks off and put them off to the side, just so that they're out of the way and I don't have to worry about them. This is what we're going to work with. So we're going to scratch build a piece that goes over the top of this, just so that, you know, we have something. And again, that will peg right into here, and then that will blend those two shapes together, and then we'll worry about the rest of this later. So what are we going to need? Well, the first thing we're going to need is this is some very, very, very thin, you can see through it, claw plate. And what I'm going to do is I guess trace the design of, or trace the edge that I'm trying to build around. And then there's my forks go up here, and then all that nonsense. So yeah, something like that. Good enough. Okay, so this is the shape that I'm working with. I think one of the easiest ways to do this would be to kind of build something that went up and then curved forward and then came out. Kind of like that. So, with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all this stuff out of the way. And I'm just going to draw some hard lines for what I need. And the biggest concern I'm going to have is making this match up with everything else. The rest you can kind of wing it, because it will be it doesn't have to fit anything. This piece has to match up. So put that on there like that. I probably should have cut a small section out before I did this, but it's no big deal. And there's the shape that we're going to cut out. Now once again, I'm going to recommend using some sort of straight edge. I'm going to use this to help me cut this shape out. And I'm just going to use a knife. Now the first thing I'm going to do is actually cut around the shape. And I'm just going to do a couple light passes with the knife rather than do one heavy one. The reason you do this is because if you do light passes, you can kind of maintain some sort of control, whereas if you're bearing down really hard, if the blade decides to catch something or change its direction, you're already bearing down, you're already cutting the plastic. There's nothing you can do to stop it, basically. So you want to just kind of take your time, 3 to 4 passes, and just, you know, work at a nice slow pace. You have no rush, no reason to hurry this along. And now we've got our shape popped out, so we can take this big sheet of flat plate and we can go put this aside. So this is the shape we're going to be working with. Now, again, this is the most important edge down here on the bottom. So this is, I guess, where I'm going to start. I'm going to go ahead and use this as my guide, and I'm going to do my best to bump that up to the edge. It's okay if you're a little bigger or smaller. You can always, it's better to have more plate than less plate, because it's easier to fix if you've cut a piece too big. So same rule, just really light strokes. Don't apply too much pressure, let the knife do all the work for you. And then maybe the third or fourth one, then you can go ahead and start applying a little bit more pressure so that you don't cut into the piece. And you only need the guide for the first cut. After that, you just follow the knife mark that you made. Now these two are really easy. You don't really need a guide for this, but you know, just be careful. And there you go. So those have cut out. Now before you go any further, you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that this matches up how you want it to. And look at that. Matches up pretty good. I could cut a little bit of the angle off of this to make this a little nicer, a little neater. So let's go ahead and do that. And for that, I'm just going to kind of cut it at a little bit of an angle and trim off some of this excess here. And then we'll test it again, make sure it fits how we want it to. This looks a lot better. So I'm really happy with that. So now I'm going to cut the diagonal. And that's going to remove a large section of this flop plate here. A little closer. For that piece, we can just go ahead and pop that off like that. And then last but not least, can kind of do one of these. It's not at a 90-degree angle, so I'm going to try and fix that with that piece. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect at the moment. You can go back and fix everything later. So we now have our template. That's all this piece is going to serve as, is to be a template. We're not actually going to put this on the model. We just used it to make sure that it fit. So now into the fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and use this stuff, which is a little bit thicker. This is 0.20, I believe, styrene sheets. I got these off Amazon, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut these into strips. Don't need very much. That might actually suffice. Actually, that will suffice. So what we're going to do is align this in a way that we don't waste a lot of sheet, so that will be fine. I'm just going to go ahead and cut some of this excess off. We'll save that for something else. Actually, that might work out really well for the edges, and as you can see, it fits on there really well. The next thing you're going to need is super glue, as soon as I figure out where my super glue went. Now this is where things are going to get kind of silly and kind of tricky, and you're probably going to get a little bit frustrated. You're going to put a dot of super glue on the back, a dot of super glue in the middle, dot of super glue on the front. That's it. Then you lay it flat in the middle of the piece. You want to kind of bump it up towards the top a little bit. Just press it down, make sure that it stays down. And then we're just going to make a couple of passes underneath the piece. There you go, 4 should be fine. And you just flip it over. Now, instead of breaking this piece off, I'm just going to use the light as a guide to see where the piece is, and do the same thing as if this entire thing were the piece, and then that's all I need is 2, because I'm only building 2 sides of this. And then take that extra piece and put it aside. We can use that for something later. So once your super glue is dried a little bit, you should be left with 2 sheets, or 2 thin strips rather, of plot plate super glued together, and then the template super glued to the top. Now this is probably the hardest part of this process, is making sure that you cut this very gently, very carefully, and you don't mess up your template. So I'm going to start on the inside, and I'm going to angle my knife a little bit so it's like just a little bit towards the inside, like if I was trying to cut into the piece. And I'm going to just bump my knife up against the part and just trace it very gently. That's pretty much all I need. So next, I guess, would be this bottom angle here. And it's okay to cut past your thing as long as there's not any weird shapes. You shouldn't have any issues with symmetry getting messed up or anything like that. But you basically want to trace the entire shape And you can also feel free to cut in multiple different directions if you're more comfortable doing that. If you want to cut it this way and then turn it around and cut it the other way, that will also help. But you're not cutting all the way through yet. Okay, so once you've cut around that edge, you're going to take your knife, poke it under the corner, and just find a good spot where there's no glue, and just gently kind of poke and prod and drag your knife across that surface. You might have to hit it from a different angle. Pull the corners up and stuff like that. I might have used a little bit too much super glue. There we go. And you just want to carefully, slowly try and cut this from the super glue. There we go. There's one. There's two. And for this last one, you definitely want to cut away from yourself so you don't hurt yourself. 3. And on the paper, or on the styrene sheet anyway, you have your shape. But Justin, it's really dirty and it's ugly and it doesn't look good. This is where you're going to start cutting over and over and over and over and over again. For large pieces like the back, where it's just a back piece, you can just go ahead and use your cutters and just cut it off. That's up to your preference. You can also fold it and do stuff like that. But I'm not going to recommend doing a whole lot of that. I think it's better to just take your time and do the cuts. Hold on to your little pieces. You can always use those to fill little gaps and stuff later. But once you've created one open side, you can just kind of drag your knife off the piece from then on, and you can bear down a little harder, and you just follow your guides. And if you ever wonder where you're at, you can flip the other piece over, and it'll be a good indication as to how far you're cutting in and how close to being done with the piece you are. And you can also feel free to move on to the next angle, because sometimes corners and stuff will get stuck and it's really hard to cut them all the way out unless you cut the other side too. There's that. You pop that out. Let me get this next. Oh, the whole thing just came off. You can already see it starting to take shape. Again, here's your template. You want to try and preserve that a little bit in case you have to make copies later. Another thing you could do would be to make a template out of a thicker piece using the small one. That way it doesn't bend or warp or anything like that, which is what I probably should have done. But I think this will be more than enough for me. I don't think I'll have any problems with the rest of this. Alright, so now we've got our shape. It matches our template pretty well. It's not identical, but it works. The piece fits over top of our actual part. And those are the two big things that we want. Now the last thing we need to do is make sure that it's symmetrical. So, where did I put my file? Here it is. I'm just going to go ahead and use this and just smooth this out and make sure that it's nice and clean. The edge looks good. I guess that's as good as that's going to get. And remember, you can always trim more of this off later, as long as you haven't like glued it down and cemented it and all that stuff. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to sort of make a box, I guess, out of your pieces. So this is what I've got left from this. This is more than enough to make a block shape. Maybe not a complete one that I'm looking for, but I can use some of these scraps as well. I've got plenty of those. So what I need is, this piece is about 5 centimeters thick. So what I'm going to do, and this is just something that I do, there might be better or worse ways to do this. I'm just going to take my ruler, and I'm going to 5 millimeters, sorry. That could have got real ugly real quick. Take this and just take my pencil and just make a line at 5 millimeters, drag it down, make a line at 5 millimeters, drag it down, make a line at 5 millimeters, and then I line those three up. And I draw a line. And then I can actually just keep my ruler here and I can bear down on it, and I can just, using the same method as tracing the template, cut along that edge. And there I have my first wall. So this will kind of go up against one of these and all that good stuff. So what I need to do now is actually get these two pieces apart. And I don't think the front, hopefully that worked. You just pop your knife in there and you just very carefully, very slowly pull it from the back. And there you go. So now you've got two pieces. You're going to want to sand those or put the glue stuff on the inside. That's weird. Why is it doing that? But this is going to be your kind of wall, if you will. So this is going to be glued on the edge here, and you want to use this as close a guide as you can. So all these are glued on the outside, and this matches up pretty good. So I guess the easiest one to do would be this, probably this corner right here. We'll just put that in there like that. So where'd my glue go? Mr. Cement, my best friend. So we'll take this, we will run some glue along the edge, and we'll just plop that piece right in the middle, and we'll bump it up against the corner, and we'll do our best to kind of hold it at the appropriate angle, make sure that it doesn't move or anything like that, and that is fine right there. And then you want to kind of play with it a little bit and just get it where you want it. Just kind of eyeball it, make sure it's at a right angle, or as close to a right angle as you can get it. And then you just kind of follow that step all the way around. So hold on 1 second, and I'll make a cut, and we'll cut the rest of these pieces out. Okay, so I've glued both of these pieces onto this first strip. It's not perfect, but it works. Now the next thing to do is to glue the top piece on, but you'll notice there's a quite a bit of overhang here. So what I'm going to do with that is just take my cutters, bump that up against the end here, and just cut that off. And that can be used for like the back or something like that. And actually that's probably the best piece to do next, just because that will kind of stabilize everything. So what we're going to do is actually use that piece that we just cut off. Still a little bit wobbly from not being completely dry, but this will help alleviate that problem. And there we go. If you need a little extra glue, you can always just kind of touch it onto the edge you want it to be on. And make sure that it stays put. Now we're going to let that sit for a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and use that same method to go the rest of the way around the box until the entire shape is filled in. And from then we can attach it to this. So I'll be back once the little box shape is complete. Okay, so I've glued all the sides on. I've made my little box. It's a little more complicated than a regular rectangle like most people would start off building, which I recommend you doing. This plugs into this, and this sits on top of this, and it matches up just how I want it to. Just gotta slide it and make sure that it fits properly. It might be a little wider in some spots, which is fine. You can just sand that all down once everything is all glued in place. But I'm really happy with the way it looks. It fits how I wanted it to, actually better than I expected it to. So the last thing to do is glue this on. So just for the sake of, the way this is all assembled, I'm actually going to glue this piece here and this piece here, and I'm going to go ahead and just bump those two together. Make sure the sides line up so that it stays on top of one another. And there you have it. So that plugs right into there with everything else. So the next step for this whole build is to kind of build like a housing for the sides of this. And these will all plug in just like that. That will make sure that that stays straight. That will plug in like that. All I gotta do now is build around the sides. But it looks a lot more like a cannon now. And actually I might just be able to go ahead and ditch this entire back piece altogether if I wanted to, and just kind of put the hole for it on the side here, and I could just mount it directly to the backpack if I wanted to, which actually I might end up doing. I might just extend this back piece just a little bit so it looks a little nicer. But these are all disassemblable so that I can paint the inner piece. I want this to be like a metallic color, and I want this housing to be white, or a gray at least, something like that. But that is what that does. That's where it goes. I tried to space it so that there's a little bit of room. So that's where that fits in. It actually looks really good on its own. I actually like that a lot. I might just go ahead and run with that. So the last thing I want to do with this is actually put a radome on it and then detail it up. So maybe I'll put another little arm coming down from the bottom to support the other little piece here, and then go from there. But that is the way that I have been learning how to scratch build. I've just been kind of winging it, honestly. I looked at a couple reference photos for railguns, and the Hi-Nu Brave is the one that kind of inspired me the most as far as this design is concerned. I just started with the teeth, and I got those done. I got those nice and symmetrical, and then I wanted to kind of practice heat sink detail, so I made the little sinks so they sat inside, and I traced this to do it, and then I traced out different shapes, and I traced two different shapes and two different thicknesses and just layered them between one another. So it's got a nice little interlay between there, so you can actually see that this is like a blade, and then it has another blade shape, but there's these little vents that pop up out of it, and those are kind of where I guess the magnets would be for the railgun, so that it can function properly. And then I built this piece next so that I had a housing for this, and I wanted to make sure that fit properly, which is kind of funny now that I might not even use it. And then I measured out these angles here on the back of this. This came out to, I think, a 30, so this is a 60. Maybe I got that backwards. And I measured those and put them on this block here, and then attach that, and then obviously you watch me do this part. So that's pretty much where it is. So from this point I've got my basic shape. Now all I need to do is cut out designs. It's going to be like layers of detail. So I've got my bulk. Now I just need to go ahead and cut stuff out to make it look like it's a shape and make it look like it's a thing, and not just so this plain block. So that is how I do that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you guys learned a little something. I learned a little bit using this. And if there's any suggestions or ways that you think that I could do this better, please feel free to shoot me a message. I'm more than willing to peek out some ideas. Like I said, I'm still learning this myself, so I'd like to hear any opinions on my structuring and things like that. But the biggest part of scratch building is just measuring and cleaning. Make sure your parts are the same size. Make sure your angles are the same. Make sure things are how they're supposed to be, and then move from that. But thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Later.